Here comes Langston.
Hello, Langston, welcome. All right, I'm going to call that critical mass. We have 5 members of the task force here and a number of members of the public. So Jeanette, would you mind going ahead and hitting record?
Here we go.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Matt Kellerman. I am one of the principal partners at Kelefors Education Partners. I'm joined by my partner, Jeanette LaForce, and also joined by Derek Mitchell, who's the CEO of Partners in School Innovation, who's partnered closely with us on this project. Tonight is the second virtual learning session of the San Francisco High School Task Force, San Francisco Unified School District High School Task Force. This session is focused on the topic of deeper learning. Tonight's agenda is that I'm going to provide a little bit of context around related to the issues that have surfaced so far through the work of the task force that has led us to have this session tonight. And then we're going to have 2 expert presentations, one from Maria Hyler of the Learning Policy Institute and one from Bob Lenz of PBL Works. Really 2 wonderful people. I'm really excited to have them join us and have you have an opportunity to talk with them. Members of the task force, after those 2 presentations, will ask you to put your cameras on and raise any questions you have for the expert presenters. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity for task force members to have discussion amongst yourselves in relation to the issue of deeper learning. At the very end of our meeting, has been our practice, the last 10 minutes of our meeting is reserved for public comment for anything that is within the scope of the task force's work, whether it's on the topic of deeper learning or anything else within the scope of the task force. And then we will conclude our meeting. We're scheduled for 2 hours this evening. Just a reminder that couple of reminders. These are our norms, so please, as I give you some other reminders, take a read through these and think about which ones you're holding this evening. The reminders I wanted to give is these learning sessions are voluntary meetings of the task force. So even though we have 25 members of the task force, it looks like about 5 people have joined this evening, which is great. And we'll expect and hope that you all will be ambassadors back to the rest of the task force based on what you learned this evening. These sessions are being taped and the presentations will be posted on the website of the task force. Will either be done tomorrow or by Monday. These are not decision-making meetings, so we did not have an expectation that there would be a quorum this evening, and I don't think there will be. But in any case, we'll post a summary of the meeting to err on the side of transparency. There may also be members of the district staff, including our key partner, Tammy Benau, who's here. There may be other members of the district offices listening in. And a reminder that in the case of this meeting, we're not using the chat feature for discussion, so you can chat to us as hosts. Feel free to chat to Jeanette or me. The only reason that our expert presenters are also listed as hosts is so that they can put some items in the chat in terms of resources, but we're not intending on that being a place for conversation with the group. So with that, I'm going to move to providing some context. As task force members know, through the process that you've been going through over a year now, essentially a year now, you've surfaced, and we together have surfaced, a number of key themes, and these are articulated as student agency, advising, equitable access, deeper learning, newcomer and English learner support, real-world experience for students, realigning teaching resources, meeting basic needs of students, and communicating about school options. We also, in addition to those issues that have surfaced, the task force has gotten some guidance from the superintendent to really pay attention to three things. One, pay attention to the goal that the district has for high school, which is that the percentage of students who are career and college ready, as defined by the California Department of Education, increases from 57.5% in which is what it was in June of 2020, to 70% by the June of 2027. The district has been taking a number of steps across multiple departments to accomplish this goal, and in its own presentations to the board has noted that there's a lot more work to be done. So this is something that the superintendent has asked that we pay very close attention to as a task force. The second thing that we're paying close attention to is the student populations who are and who have historically been furthest from opportunity in the district, and ensuring that they have the supports and the programs that they need to thrive. And finally, this is a time of constrained resources in the district when it comes to budget, staffing, and facilities. And we want to make sure that the resources that in a time of declining enrollment, including significant declining enrollment this year in 9th grade, that we're developing recommendations that are aligned with the ensuring that resources are focused on meeting that career and college readiness goal. So in order to support the work of the task force and continue the conversation with these goals and focuses in mind, we've developed these topics for deeper study. Last week, we did a session focused on advising, which are the system level practices to provide students with strong career and college advising. This evening, we're going to focus in on the construct of deeper learning, looking particularly at the system level practices to promote deeper learning for students. And the system-wide structures to make that more real across the district. And then we have two more sessions, one next week focused on pathways and one focused on selectivity. Today, we're going to be joined by two experts that I mentioned, and I'll introduce each of them as they come on and give their presentations. What we've asked them to do is to look at the report that we put together, the Looking at Student Journeys final report, the findings, and we shared some specific findings with them. And we've asked them to use their experience to share specific school level and district level practices in California and elsewhere that are the biggest drivers of effective implementation of deeper learning practices. We've asked them to include examples of school and district practices that are both in traditional high schools and in alternative high schools, and share ways that those practices are designed to support diverse student populations. And we've asked them to we've named for them that this is a time of constrained resources, and so knowing what strategies are particularly high leverage for consideration would be particularly important, and even consider what practices the district might consider eliminating or reducing given those constrained resources. So we'll have those presentations and we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, and then I'll come back to some points of discussion. So I would ask you as task force members to take out, whether it's a piece of paper or whether it's somewhere on your computer, take notes as you go along, because we're going to come back and ask you what this evening resonates for you, what feels missing, and what questions remain for you. So before we go to the presentation, any questions from task force members about what we are trying to accomplish today? If so, go ahead and come off mute and put your camera on.
So thanks, Matt. I just want to be clear about the process in terms of getting the information back to the rest of the task force.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing is that there's going to be a documenting process, but also that task members can share their insights once the entire task force comes together again. Is that correct?
That's correct. So on September 9th, is when we're going to be having our day-long session that's focused on decision making, and we're going to be hoping and expecting from you, those of you who are here this evening. And this is nice because there's not much overlap from the last time, so task force members are taking seriously coming to at least one of the sessions, but we'll count on the 5 of you who are here this evening to be ambassadors back to the rest of the group, to share what did you learn, what sort of resonated the most, and what do you want the rest of the group to pay attention to. And we also, of course, will be inviting task force members to review the video so they can see the presentations for themselves. Okay? Great. So with that, just for ease with the presentation, it would probably be better if everybody turned off their videos. You can keep them on if you want, but we're going to be spotlighting the one person who is speaking at a time, and that'll just make it nicer for the presentations. So with that, Maria, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera. Everyone, I would like to introduce you to Maria Hyler. Dr. Maria Hyler, she is the director of the Learning Policy Institute's DC office. So she's coming to us from the East Coast where it's later in the evening. Thank you so much, Maria, for being here. Maria directs the Educator Prep Laboratory in partnership with the Bank Street Graduate School of Education. As a person myself who focuses a lot on leadership development, it's very exciting to have somebody who has taken the work around deeper learning and focused on how that gets applied in the leader preparation space. Maria has been an assistant professor of teacher preparation and professional development at the University of Maryland, and she has a long track record as a teacher herself in Belmont, California. And when you can see more about that in her bio. She also has a PhD in curriculum and instruction from Stanford University and a teaching credential from Harvard, as well as her undergraduate degree from Wellesley College. She is a tremendous expert around the issue of deeper learning, and we are thrilled that she's able to be here this evening. And with that, Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Matt, and a special thank you to the task force for having me here tonight to share a bit about what the research says regarding deeper learning experiences, and then examples of how schools and districts are taking up this work. Next slide, please. I'd like to return to the guiding principles for equitable whole child design that Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond briefly introduced to the task force at your first meeting. And I'm going to use this as a frame for my presentation on deeper learning, because deeper learning is the process as well as the outcome we want for our students. As you all know, deeper learning capacities, their competencies are the knowledge and skills we want our students to obtain, such as critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, deep knowledge of subject, and academic and growth mindsets. Deeper learning experiences are the pedagogies and the curriculum that need to occur for students to have the opportunity to learn these competencies. And I'll also be talking a little bit about context and environment, because I think it's very easy for us to drill down quickly to what teachers and educators are doing in classrooms and schools, but you have to think about the whole environment and the culture and climate in which these pedagogies and curriculums take place for deeper learning to occur. These guiding principles for equitable whole child design helps us to think about how schools and classrooms should be designed to enable teachers to create those learning opportunities we know as deeper learning and the context in which they take place. These principles are grounded in the science of learning and development, and you'll hear me refer to SOLD often in the next 20 minutes, and that's what I'm referring to, the science of learning and development, or SOLD. And I'm going to go through each of these 5 domains, share what the research says, and then offer some examples of what they look like in practice. Next slide. You have access to the report these findings come from, Design Principles for Schools. LPI published the design playbook, and the cover of which you see here last year in collaboration with Turnaround for Children and under the advisement of the SOLD Alliance and over 60 experts, school designers, and association representatives. Next slide. The first principle is positive developmental relationships or connections that allow effective care, agency, and community among and between educators, students, and other adults. Deeper learning cannot take place without these relationships. SOLD tells us that building trustful relationships not only catalyzes learning, but also facilitates healthy school attachments and a sense of belonging. They also take on a protective effect as they enable adults to more accurately perceive and respond to a young person's needs and provide emotional security and stability. Next slide. There are a number of aligned structures and practices that schools can integrate to build and sustain positive connections between and among students, practitioners, and families. A sampling of these is seen in orange, like advisories, which you've talked about, I know, in a past meeting, which create small family units in schools that allow young people to regularly connect with an adult and a small group of peers. Opportunities for educators to collaborate, particularly when educators share a group of students in common through looping, are also particularly impactful. For example, a teacher at Benjamin Franklin Intermediate School in Daly City noted, "Through looping, I've had my students in math and science class for 2 years now. What strikes me the most is the progress of students who often get lost in the system. The shy ones who ask questions because they trust me, the unmotivated ones who now come in for help because they know I'll be supportive, the defiant ones who now recognize that I'm an ally who cares for them. These are the kids who need adult support the most, but it takes them the longest to develop relationships. Looping gives us the time to make these relationships happen." Looping provides a successful structure for deeper learning because it not only builds adult relationships, but also gives practitioners an opportunity to plan curriculum and address students' holistic needs. Building connections with families is another practice that supports relationship building. Practices like family teacher conferences or home visits are important exchanges where support for students can be co-created with families. And this is a deeper learning opportunity, not only for the student and the family, but for the teacher as well. And so when we think about building relationships, it propels and catalyzes learning, but it also is a learning opportunity and a deeper learning opportunity in and of itself. Next slide. Another important way to support deeper learning and youth development is to cultivate environments filled with safety and belonging. SOLD fundamentally tells us that contexts influence learning. Contexts communicate messages about who's valued and what sorts of behaviors or ways of being are rewarded or sanctioned. They also influence the conditions of learning. Context can create conditions that open the brain to learning and engagement. They can also ameliorate social identity threats that undermine student confidence, performance, and engagement. They can even nurture pro-social orientations that support social and emotional development and socialize students in their roles as community members. You can have the most amazing deeper learning project-based design, but if a student feels unwelcome or as if they cannot be successful in a classroom, no deeper learning will take place in that school or classroom. So it's really important to be thinking about these pieces together, not just what the curriculum and the pedagogy looks like. Next slide. Structures and practices that nurture a supportive learning environment include those you see here in orange. Practitioners can cultivate routines and shared values that provide consistency, which reduces stress and supports physical, emotional, and psychological safety that enables learning. For example, at the high school level, Social Justice Humanitas, a public school in Los Angeles, California, uses councils as a component of advisory classes to build community and create a space for the practice of listening and speaking from the heart. During councils, students and teachers sit together in a circle and take turns sharing the positive and difficult things happening in their lives. Daily classroom-based community meetings can be paired with additional community meetings that bring students and staff together across classrooms or grades. For instance, at Valor Collegiate Academies in Nashville, Tennessee, middle school students and staff participate in weekly meetings called Valor Circles. Circles are single gender groupings of about 20 students led by a mentor teacher. Circles incorporate mindfulness exercises and opportunities to share about the work on interpersonal issues. Educators can also use restorative practices which proactively build relationships and community to prevent wrongdoing and encourage humanistic approaches to conflict resolution. Or cultivating culturally responsive classrooms so that young people, particularly students of color, LGBTQ youth, and others have their full selves validated and nurtured. Next slide. Schools with SOLD at their foundation engage youth in experiences not only support deeper learning, but also their sense of competency, efficacy, and motivation that keeps students cognitively engaged. This includes curriculum and pedagogy that piques student curiosity and is relevant to their lives, backgrounds, and interests, as well as learning that enables youth to apply knowledge and skills in meaningful and new ways, and are supported in doing so with appropriate scaffolds that meet their academic and developmental assets and needs. Next slide. SOLD highlights this type of deeper learning through things like inquiry-driven, experiential, or hands-on learning, which are most impactful when coupled with a range of scaffolds that help to reduce cognitive load and open up mental space for problem-solving and higher-order thinking skills. Using instructional approaches that build upon students' prior knowledge and cultural practices are also elevated and SOLD. These approaches draw on the familiar to engage students and build connections to disciplinary knowledge and skills. One such approach to enlisting student voice and agency is referred to as reality pedagogy, in which students take ownership of their own learning by co-teaching each other and build from their cultural and home life context by sharing and examining relevant artifacts. Teachers learn alongside students and engage them in co-designing the learning process, acknowledging their own limitations with academic content. This approach creates community, shared experience, and common knowledge among members of the classroom about one another and the communities they live in, as it enables students to become responsible for their own learning, as well as one another, valuing and leveraging their different identities. Educators and students alike can learn in culturally responsive ways by engaging in community-based projects that ask them to critically analyze issues within their communities and take action to impact change. These projects are often launched by posing an essential question or equity-focused problem to students, or by asking students to identify issues impacting them and their communities. Students have an authentic audience and purpose for their work. And this is also key for teachers who may not be from their communities, their students' communities, because they're learning about their students, their families, and their communities, and they're starting to understand students' cultural way of knowing. So teachers might mistake students' knowledge and understanding that's culturally based if they're not keyed into what that looks like, what the experiences of their students are. For example, a math teacher asking a question about a bus pass. Is it cheaper to buy a daily bus pass for $2.50 or a day, or $15 for a weekly pass? And it could be that the answer is correct for $15 for the weekly pass, and a teacher might mark a student wrong for choosing daily pass if they don't know that the student shares that daily pass with their friends and family, right? So if a teacher has a deep knowledge and understanding of a student, their culture and experiences, and or just good pedagogy, they're going to ask the student, well, explain your reasoning behind this. And instead of just marking a student wrong, they'll acknowledge and value a student's cultural knowledge in the academic space, which it ties into feedback and asking knowledge. So incorporating feedback loops and opportunities for revision through things like formative or self or peer assessments are also additional ways that optimize deeper learning, as it welcomes errors not as problems, but as insights into how to improve one's understanding. Next slide, please. Given the nature of these pedagogical approaches and their cognitive, social, emotional demands, SOLD underscores that this form of deeper learning is best supported when schools intentionally cultivate productive skills, habits, and mindsets. SOLD tells us that developing these competencies is not secondary to deeper learning, but rather propels it. So one's ability to learn is actually enhanced as we develop physical, cognitive, social, and emotional capacities simultaneously. Next slide, please. In practice, this means explicitly integrating opportunities for youth to cultivate self and social awareness, and opportunities to learn and improve interpersonal skills like collaboration, collective problem solving, and conflict resolution, as well as enabling students to persevere in the face of personal and learning challenges, to manage their own learning, and to build a sense of agency and purpose. One way this is done is through nurturing a growth mindset, an attitude that their ability and intelligence isn't fixed, but can grow and thrive with effort. Educators can support students in developing a growth mindset by making a regular practice of providing opportunities for revision in response to feedback. The power of constructive critique and revisions are on full display in the practices implemented by a teacher as he guides students at Presumpcot Elementary School in Portland, Maine, in reviewing and providing feedback on written drafts. Instructional tools can support this practice, including the use of rubrics and self and peer assessments. When followed by opportunities for revision, these tools can reinforce a growth mindset as students consider specific feedback to guide the improvement of their work and build their belief in their ability to grow and succeed. All of these ideas can be explicitly taught and discussed in classrooms. Teachers can model them and think aloud so students can understand how they are built and used. They also don't need to be standalone learning opportunities. Practitioners should integrate the development of these skills into academic instruction so they are used and applied frequently. Next slide, please. A final area of school practice that's SOLD is underscores is the role of integrated support systems. And these systems can create a coordinated web of supports and interventions that mitigate the effects of adversity, especially when they are readily available and accessible in ways that don't stigmatize or shame. And this is really the support net for deeper learning. Because you can, again, have all these strategies to incorporate deeper learning pedagogies and opportunities in classrooms. But as students are facing trauma, as students are engaged in life, as we know, there's struggles. And so when you have integrated support systems, that's the net that's going to catch and collect and support the deeper learning that we want to see take place. Next slide, please. To do this, SOLD points to the ways schools can build coherent and coordinated multi-tiered systems of support to remove barriers and advance deeper learning, which include universal supports or everyday practices like relationship building and collaboration structures that make the core work of school supportive. These can, in turn, surface additional academic, social, and emotional needs, which can be met through supplemental supports like those you see in orange, or when necessary, connect young people to more intensive interventions, which can be supported through partnerships or other school-based coordinated structures. And I know also at your first task force meeting, Linda Darling-Hammond talked about community schools. And community schools, while not the only way of incorporating integrated support systems, they do offer one way as a student support system to expand learning time, opportunities, family and community engagement, and collaborative leadership and practices that exemplify integrated support systems. So when we're thinking about school design or school redesign, community schools are really an excellent way to take this up. These schools often draw on a wide range of community and cultural resources, including partnerships with families to strengthen trust and build resilience as children have more support systems and people work collaboratively to help address the stresses of poverty and associated adversities children may face. Many community schools operate year-round from morning to evening, serving both children and adults. Community schools also have dedicated staff, such as a community school director or a family liaison, who support the coordination and sustainability of their various structures and programs. Community school personnel are typically part of the school leadership team and other governance bodies in the school. The community school manager or director generally conducts assets and needs assessments, recruits and coordinates the work of community resources, and tracks program data. There are several models of community schools, all of which have been adopted to respond to local assets and needs. Next slide, please. So in sharing this comprehensive school design principles, I was really intending to provide you with a glimpse into the guidance SOLD provides on how schools can be designed or redesigned to support deeper learning and well-being. And as I really was trying to communicate, we can focus on just like teacher practices and what's going on in the classrooms, but it's really important to focus on those and then step out a little bit to think about what is the environment in which this is happening, where there's supports for those as well. How are we providing professional learning opportunities for teachers and leaders to be able to do this work? How are we ensuring that the relationships are in place? What are the different supports that are needed to enable deeper learning in schools? All these pieces are really important when we think about addressing systemic inequities, as well as really thinking about meeting the acute and compounding challenges we currently see with our young people. The guiding principles of whole child design and the design principles playbook that describes it put a spotlight on these areas of practice, taking care to define them and summarize their evidence base, as well as uplift real-world examples so that users can see high quality implementation in action. And I was only able to pull a few here and there given time constraints, but you have the links, and they have, it's a resource that's very rich with examples from different types of schools all across the nation. And it's really a great resource in thinking about the work that's being done in your district. And also in just preparing for this, I was seeing all the great work that's already being done in your district, and it's a great idea to spend some time looking at that and thinking about those practices as pilots in smaller places, and then how to think about scaling up those practices more in a more widespread way. And while these practices and structures within each segment were discussed discreetly, you could hear the overlap. And they look different in different contexts, but they can help practitioners create schools that are scientifically grounded, effective, and equitable, and result in deeper learning for all students. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it back over to Matt.
Thank you very much, Maria. Really appreciate you sharing that wisdom and insight, and look forward to the task force members having a chance to ask you questions about that presentation. And just a reminder to the members of the task force that the links that Maria shared, we'll be posting those along with a couple of selected resources that we'll be encouraging you to review following the presentation. So again, thank you very much, Maria. At this point, I'd like to ask Bob Lenz to turn your camera on. And Jeanette, if you could spotlight Bob. Great.
Hello.
Hello, Bob. Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Bob Lenz. Bob is the CEO of PBL Works, which had been formerly known as the Buck Institute for Education, which is an organization that does tremendous work to support teachers, schools, districts, to implement high-quality project-based learning across the K-12 education spectrum. He is one of the country's most renowned experts on project-based learning and its connection to school redesign, and you can see he's an author in this area as well. He, in addition to his current role, Bob has been a middle and high school teacher and founded a network of charter schools, which is now known as Envision Education, includes schools here in San Francisco and in the East Bay. He led that organization for 15 years and at that point took over in his current role at PBL Works. As I said, he's one of the country's real leaders in the area of project-based learning, which is a key central idea when we're talking about deeper learning. So I'm really excited to turn the mic over to Bob, and I will again turn off my camera. Hold on a second. Just don't start talking yet, Bob. But anyway, Bob, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Matt. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited that there's a task force in San Francisco for high school redesign. I was just reflecting that in the 1990s, part of a team that redesigned a high school and got involved in the redesign work, and a lot of things that we talked about was that the world had changed dramatically and high schools had stayed the same over the last 100 years leading up to the late 1990s, early 2000s. Well, here we are, 2023, and high schools remain the same, and I think the world's dramatically changed since 1996, 97. So I hope I share with you a great sense of urgency about redesigning our high schools in San Francisco and across our country. Next slide, please. So our vision at PBL Works is for all students, and particularly Black and Brown students, to engage in high-quality project-based learning so they can deepen their learning and achieve success in college and career and life. And what we know from our experience and from practice is that project-based learning leads to academic skills and knowledge that's both students know and can demonstrate their knowledge. They gain success skills or deeper learning outcomes, or often skills and dispositions that are in a portrait of a graduate, like collaboration, critical thinking. And I think probably even more importantly, what I've experienced and is really, engaging as an educator is this sense of purpose and agency to tackle the issues in the students' lives and in their community. Next slide. So as we think about deeper learning, we think about it as the competencies to promote the ability to transfer learning and apply it to new and complex situations in an ever-changing global environment. So higher order thinking skills, learning dispositions, collaboration skills. We believe this is not something that you learn in a lecture and you read in a book. You actually have to do it to learn it. You have to reflect on it. You have to do it quite often. Project-based learning is a vehicle to get to deeper learning. Next slide. So we like to say that all project-based learning is deeper learning, but not all deeper learning is project-based learning. So there's different components, but if you engage in secondary schools and high schools in project-based learning, you will be moving towards deeper learning. Just recently, we work quite closely and expansively with the Department of Education in Kentucky and their deeper learning initiative. We're working with about a third of their schools across the state. They have 8 collaboratives. In a recent meeting we were part of, the collaboratives came together and some of the districts that were there were asked, like, so how are you operationalizing this work towards deeper learning for all? And 6 out of the 7 said their main focus is project-based learning as the way they operate that. Next slide, please. So we like to think about project-based learning as the plate that holds the different aspects of deeper learning. So a portrait of a graduate, which I know San Francisco Unified has one. Deeper learning outcomes. Often those two can be very closely related. Folks who use STEM as a science, technology, engineering, and math as a focus, or STEAM, meaning arts. We see lots of great work in social emotional learning through using project-based learning as the vehicle to build capacity for students for SEL. A way to personalize learning, which you'll see one of our design elements is voice and choice. Literacy is a huge part of project-based learning, and of course, equity. So we believe like this can be the way that high schools and districts with high schools can work towards deeper learning as a very tangible, codified strategy, project-based learning. Next slide, please. So we have a theory of action, like how you get to those type of students' experiences and outcomes. We're working with, as I said, in states where we work very closely with the state of Kentucky, and we think of leadership starting up at the state. We have a state advisory committee that helps guide the work across the whole state. And then we also work closely with the state of Hawaii. We work with over 15 districts simultaneously, folks you might have heard of, like Clark County Schools in Las Vegas, Broward County Schools in Florida, Loudoun County Public Schools in Virginia. Locally, we work with Santa Clara Unified School District. We've worked with San Leandro Unified School District. So we see project-based learning, thinking about it from a systemic point of view or from a school level point of view. This theory of action holds. That leaders are, and we believe it begins with leadership and a sense of coherence at the district level, and specifically with the leadership and a leadership team at the schools. Their charge is to put the conditions in place. I'll go a little deeper into that, but the vision, the culture, capacity building, continuous improvement, focused on high quality project-based learning. This is, and where we think the center of this is then in teacher practice. That by building the capacity of teachers using gold standard design and PBL units and gold standard PBL teaching practices, then students are going to experience at least 2 projects a year. And that is our theory, that sometimes when we think about this change, it gets quite large, and we've come down to like what's the minimal intervention that actually leads to outcomes for students. And the schools that we've researched and the districts and we've seen, it's at least 2 projects a year per student. This is doable. We've seen districts actually put policies in place that calls for all students to do 2 projects a year. It can be all high school students, it could be K through 12, but it's an expectation that students are going to get this. And those, with that project, you'll see with that dosage, you'll get to student outcomes. With academic outcomes, a sense of empowerment, and on success skills. We participate in, we'll share, Matt and Jeanette will share some links to research that briefs that we've put out. Most recently, we were involved in a large scale study that was supported by Lucas Education Research, looking at project-based approach to AP Environmental Science and AP Government. In the study, it was determined that the students in the first year had an 8% more likely of getting a 3-year better on the AP exam. In the second year, which is really unheard of to get better results in the second year, we had a 10%. In addition to that, students on the College Work Ready assessment showed far bigger gains in critical thinking and communication skills, and the sense of like they actually wanted to go study these subjects in college. The results were so impressive that the College Board is now a partner, and we're training 700 to 800 teachers a year in these curriculum areas, and we're helping them move more and more of their AP curriculum to a project-based approach so that students get at least 2 projects a year. Next slide. So as you're thinking about like and Marisa did such a great job on the larger scale of what needs to be put in place, when we're specifically thinking about project-based learning, but we actually think these are transferable to any, we work with leaders in a network approach and school district leaders at the leadership level to be really clear about why project-based learning is going to be implemented in their school or their district. How does it relate to the graduate profile? What we found, and I would encourage you to, I know how hard it is to do this, but to take another look at the graduate portrait of a graduate for San Francisco Unified. When I saw that, it was very difficult for me to see how schools and teachers can really get specific and focused in redesigning in their own schools and their classrooms to get to that vision. It's very aspirational and it's very beautiful, but it's what we find is the ones that are more specific go right to the dispositions and the skills. We're more likely to actually drive the changes people want to see. We believe you have to think about, especially with project-based learning, what are the infrastructures that need to be put in place, whether that's the schedule, the planning time for teachers, the opportunity for tools and resources for the assessments. There's many different aspects of how you actually start to redesign how the school day works so that it fosters the type of teaching and learning and assessment you want to see. Teachers will need their capacity built through professional learning. That's what we do. But when we talk to leaders, like you can purchase workshops from us or for others to come in and do a training. But we believe that this has to be ongoing and built into the regular professional learning that teachers do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in staff meetings, department meetings, team meetings, professional development days. Thinking about continuous improvement and what data and assessment is going to look like. Thinking broader and whole child, as we talked about earlier, about performance-based assessments. Looking at that data and using it to refine and build an evidence base over time. One of the things we can share with you is our evidence toolkit that we designed with the state of Hawaii and some other districts that folks are finding quite helpful in guiding their journey in an evidence-based way. And finally, all of this is undergirded by a strong sense of a culture for learning, a sense of safety, both for the students and for the teachers to take the risk to try something new and to engage in that sort of a culture of respect and trust. Next slide, please. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is often when we say, well, we believe you really want to move to project-based learning as a way to operationalize deeper learning, folks will say we do projects. Well, I want to go just a little deep here to say, what's the difference between a project and project-based learning? We like to think about it like in a food metaphor, like we believe project-based learning is the main course and not dessert. Next slide. So we are known for creating the gold standard for project-based learning, really codifying what it means to implement, design, and then implement project-based learning, or choose curriculum that's project-based. On the left side is the gold and orangey colored aperture is the design principles, and on the green and blue is our teaching practices. In the center is always learning goals. So we're going to go a little deeper and just think about design. So next slide, please. So that's before I get to that, one framework is our gold standard. Oops. Back to the equity levers. Oops.
Bob, just hold on 1 second. Sorry, I messed up on something.
No worries.
Recording stopped.
Just going to take me a second. Something went strange on my computer, and I'm just about to fix it. Bob, is this where you want to be?
Yes, thanks.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So two frameworks I wanted to share. One was our gold standard design and teaching practice. The other is our equity levers. These are key and embedded into our design process now as we work with teachers or design our own curriculum to distribute. And also as part of the professional learning that we provide for teachers and leaders to think about the knowledge of students. And Maria really focused on that nuance that comes like even in the answer, like with a math problem. But when you're thinking about the design and the teaching of projects, you really want to build the opportunity for inquiry and choice that is related to your students and can be culturally relevant. That it's a high cognitive demand. I think I can't emphasize enough that when done well, project-based learning is quite intellectually challenging. And of course it is hands-on and it can be fun and engaging, but it really is a stretch. And I think this is sometimes where projects are, as opposed to project-based learning, are really lacking in the sense of cognitive demand. Literacy is a huge opportunity through projects for students to actually read for purpose, write for purpose, listen across a range of contexts and disciplines. We've often seen in schools and districts and systems that go all in with project-based learning, we'll see a very quick bump in their literacy assessments because you're in a sense integrating it in and you're almost doubling down because it's not just happening in ELA now, English language arts, literacy is happening across the curriculum. And probably the most important and often the most challenging for educators is actually to share the power. Cultivating student voice, choice, agency, and interdependence in the classroom. Project-based learning that's what it's all about. And it's a huge equity lever. Next slide. So let's talk about the difference between the main course and not dessert. Next slide. So tale of two classrooms, what's the difference? Let's think about a science, maybe it's a health science course, and maybe it's even in a health academy, in a high school that has academies and career academies or health pathway. So first we'll look at what we've considered would be project as a dessert, and then I'll share an example of a project as the main course. Next slide. So project as a dessert. So it's a 3-week unit, and you see that this probably looks very familiar in a sense of what you'd expect in a comprehensive high school. Activities, lectures, labs, texts, based discussion, quizzes. more lectures, maybe a speaker. And then when it's done, the students create a board game. And they have 2 days to do that. And that's the unit. Next slide, please. So then you see a board game that looks like this, the Human Body Systems game board. Very interesting, but not necessarily a great application of the knowledge that they're going to do. Thinking about as you look at that and think about our equity levers, which ones might be present, which ones might not, or in the sense of gold standard design. That's a different way of approaching it, where PBL is going to be the main course. Next slide. So in the medical interns project, students are going to take on the role of medical interns who are asked to help diagnose sick patients and recommend the best treatment plan. They learn about the body systems, they collaborate with a medical doctor via video chat, they interview mock patients, and they engage in research. And teams are going to present their diagnosis and recommendations to a panel of experts, parents, and classmates. So notice there's experts and parents in the audience, not just classmates. This authentic audience, if you really want to raise the cognitive demand in the sense of performance, we see it happen. The authentic and outside audience outside of the classroom is a great driver for high quality work. Next slide, please. So in a project as a main course, you're going to see that you're moving through this you still have text-based sessions, there's still some lecture, there's still some things to learn. Students are still doing some labs, but they're also given time to work and work through that inquiry of the driving question that they had in their project. There's context now for a field study or a field trip. Based on the information and the question that they have, they're not just going to as a tourist to a place. They're actually going as a real life medical intern who's thinking about how they're going to apply that to their diagnosis and to their presentation. More time for workshops, critique and revision. The critique protocol that Maria talked to. This is real work and a real audience that they're focused on. So they take the critique quite seriously. And then they present their products and they get feedbacks from the experts and their parents and their classmates. And then they have an opportunity to do reflection and think about how did they apply and demonstrate that knowledge that they learned. What were the success skills or the deeper learning outcomes that they used, and how did they do it well? Do they need to get better at collaboration or their presentations or their communication skills or maybe their research skills? And they can even, often in this project, we've seen the students submit their research papers to journals or to outside audiences. Next slide, please. So as you see, there was in that project, what makes it gold standard and main course is there's sustained inquiry. You saw that in Maria's presentation, inquiry-based learning. It's another one where we think all project-based learning is inquiry-based learning, all high quality. Not all inquiry-based learning is project-based. It's authentic, it connects to the students. If you know your students well, then you can make it authentic. There's always voice and choice. Reflection is critical. That's where the transfer happens. That's how deeper learning happens. Critique and revision, getting used to giving and receiving kind, specific feedback. The product is public. The product is beyond the classroom, and students are really working on things that are challenging, a problem or question that's challenging. Next slide, please. So I ask you, as you're thinking about this in the schools in San Francisco Unified and the high schools, how does this connect to what you're seeing in the data that you've been reviewing in the other presentations, as these type of sustained inquiry, project-based experiences? Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to the ensuing dialogue.
Bob, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Between the two presentations, that's quite an amazing amount and quality of information that you all were both able to share. Maria, would you mind coming on screen? So Bob's on screen and Maria's on screen. I would ask the task force members who are here, if you wouldn't mind also coming on screen. Hi, Rianda. Hi, Vanessa. Just task force members, please. Hi, Luz, how are you? Hey, Langston, how are you? And hey, Juliana, how are you? Great, I think that's everyone who's a task force member who's here this evening. So I will turn it over to you, task force members. The floor is open for any questions that you have for either Bob or Maria or for both of them. And the only thing I would ask is the first time you talk, introduce yourself so that Bob and Maria know who you are. Oh, and I'm sorry, it looks like Karen Chow is on the call too, I think. So if you wouldn't mind coming on camera if you have a moment, Karen. Thanks.
I think we should just proceed.
Go ahead, Vanessa, come off mute.
Hi there. My name is Vanessa Marrero. I'm the Executive Director of Parents of Public Schools of San Francisco. And I do have a couple questions. And it's related not to PBL. Everybody knows you and knows how great you are and how great PBL is for kids. It's related to the process of implementation. I mean, we could want any really great gold standard program in our schools, but for whatever reason, the process of implementation, it's just not there. And you showed that in the master schedule or the lesson planning for the PBL, right? With the dessert versus the actual entree. So I think we need to understand and get recommendations from you about what are efficacious implementation practices that could happen at a systems level in a district this size, as well as within the schoolhouse, so that kids can get the outcomes that, you know, that they actually deserve to get. And that, I think, once we have that at a baseline, we will have a lot, we'll start better off, right? Because it's just not like another year that SFUSD tried to implement PBL, right? We remember when we tried that years ago, okay? So I just wanna, kind of underscore this because educators are at a different emotional state than I think they've ever been. And I think whatever we do, we really need to do very intentionally, and we need to have it be done well thought, right? And we need to make sure that parents are not seen as kind of like, give me some feedback, but you're not really the expert, but that the parent is the expert because that's the one that's rearing the child every day. So how do we partner with parents in a way to be able to build in these practices? You know, what's homework that the students and the parent can do? You know, what could happen on Saturday or a Sunday? Because I agree. I mean, I would love SFUSD to implement PBL, defenses of learning. I think all that's really great, but it's the implementation and the efficacy there that we need to kind of hone in on. I think as a problem of practice, not necessarily if the curricula is the right fit. Thanks, Matt.
So Vanessa, would you like me to respond to that, or is that just a statement?
If you want, or yeah, however you want to do it. I'm not sure.
I would, yeah, please,
time, so.
Bob and Maria, I'd love you to weigh in based on Vanessa's kind of combination of thoughts and comments, please.
Maria, do you want to start?
You go ahead and start first, since the specific example was PBL.
So I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think that's really critical. when I started now 8 years ago at Buckminster Education and PBO Works, I went and talked to some of our district partners, and I would talk to the teachers, and the teachers would say, "Yeah, I loved your workshops, and I was so excited, and I came back and I started doing the projects, but my principal didn't even know what was going on, and he was upset because kids were moving around the classroom." And I'm like, "It's PBL, that's what they're supposed to do." And then we were getting ready for our presentations and learning, and then the district scheduled our benchmark assessment at the same time, and I had to reschedule it, and it never happened. So when we think about it, like it really starts at the district. If you're going to think about it systemically, everybody's going to be all, and there's got to be a sense of coherence. And it's a long run play. It's not like you're going to do a 3-day workshop, although our 3-day workshops are great. But that's not going to lead to the systemic change that you're desiring to see happen. So when we work with school districts, like the ones I mentioned, we work at the district level to think systemically with the district team. We work with and their whole plan is to build up the sense of coherence and the coordination. So over time, that we work with and networked approach with the school principals and their teams. And so they're the ones who are really starting to think about those, the conditions that need to be put in place, and especially the capacity building over time. And then you start training teachers. And the work that sort of developed the evidence framework that we shared, there's also a report up there from two school districts we worked with, one in New Hampshire and one in Hawaii, to see if we could, use diffusion of innovation theory, like of thinking about using the folks who are most ready to get going, opinion leaders, to build their capacity. So we worked at the district level, the network, the principals, and then teachers. And we were able to get about 70% of the kids doing 2 projects a year within 3 years. And then COVID happened and it declined significantly, but both those school districts are still committed and continue to train new teachers and keep it going. But it's not a silver bullet. It's got to be thought of systemically, just as you mentioned. And the power, as you mentioned, for parent involvement is once your students engaged in learning, you don't get the what'd you do at school today on nothing. They actually have something to talk about. And then the presentations of learning, being able to go in and interact with your son or daughter or a child is probably the most meaningful experiences for most parents, as opposed to going to a conference or an open house. But I agree, you have to go in and sustain support over time, or it might not be worth starting. It's got to be all or nothing.
The only thing that I would add to that from a non-PBL perspective is also just taking stock of the district schools where everyone is at. So where are the strengths that can be built upon, and where are the challenges, the anticipated challenges that might come up, and really thinking very specifically about your context, and then planning for the context. So the approach might be different. It could be that there's 5 of the schools that get, scaled up over time, and they become demonstration schools, and then the adoption is a slower rollout. So really thinking about what is the long-term strategy that's going to be effective in the district is something to think about by understanding what are the areas of strength to build upon, and where our potential obstacles are, and like I said, planning for it.
Before we go on to another question, I just want to welcome Matt Wayne, the superintendent for San Francisco Unified, to the conversation. Matt, we're hearing from Bob Lenz and Maria Hyler, who have, we'll send you the videos of their presentations, but we're doing Q&A with the task force right now. So welcome. Is there anything you wanted to sort of chime in with before we continue with our conversation?
No, just thanks for organizing. I know this one's on deeper learning, and just appreciate the opportunity to go deeper on a few topics. So I thought I'd just stop by and hear the discussion.
Great, thank you. Task force members, more questions?
Yeah. And thanks, task force members. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Hope you had a little quiet time in July, and appreciate you being here in August.
Vanessa, thank you for the good question. Langston, Rionda, Luz, Karen, Juliana, questions? Luz.
I have sort of a follow-up comment and maybe a question from Vanessa, but so how do you...
And can you introduce yourself, Luz?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my name is Luz Guayanca, and I'm a middle school parent in the district. So how would a district like SFUSD implement any changes, and specifically in the project-based learning systems, while going through a time where it's hard to recruit teachers, or we're seeing them, anybody following board docs, there are pages and pages of teachers that are separating from the district, and that's very discouraging for me as a parent. So trying to be optimistic through any change while dealing with the teacher shortage and hard time recruiting them. How does a district navigate the situation, and what can families do to help in this situation?
One thing I will, I'll start us off if that's okay, Bob. Actually adopting a framework such as problem-based learning can serve as a recruitment tool. I know that there's one small district in North Carolina that's very rural, and they started a lab school, and they went to local universities and, you know, said, we're doing this innovative work in our small school, and teachers were interested, and so they their innovation, their willingness to try something new actually was a draw for the young teachers who were looking for spaces to be innovative. So one response is that it's not necessarily a bad thing during a time of teacher shortages to try something new as a way to encourage our young, excited teachers who want to be innovative, who want to not just be in schools with rows of desks and paper and pencil. So to not be afraid to try something while we're in challenging times, and to partner as you already are, but continue to partner with university and preparation programs that are aligned with the type of deeper learning that you want to see happening in your classrooms. I would say to start us off, and I'd love to hear Bob's.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We have never been busier in the history of the Buck Institute for Education and PBO Works than we are in 2023. We have more district partners, we have state partners, we have school, district and school level leaders who are looking to engage both their students and their teachers in learning in a way that feels connected and authentic and joyful. So I think this is I would completely agree with Maria, like this is the time. But most of us got into teaching and education because we wanted to make a difference in young people's lives. And it's been the way schools organized, especially high schools, it's very difficult to know as an educator whether you're making a difference or not. When you're a project-based learning teacher, you know almost every day is the level of engagement that you have with students. It's not easy. It's different, and that's why there needs to be support from leadership. There needs to be capacity building. There needs to be resources given to it. But it is a great tool for both attracting and retaining educators. And one of my favorite part of my job is, like, you know, either reviewing summaries of evaluations, or sometimes actually being able to talk to teachers, veteran teachers. And it just happened this year at PBL World, our annual event that we hold. It's a PBL training event. And this teacher who's been teaching for over 30 years, and she really wasn't, she came because she was made to go to the conference. She's, got maybe a year or two left. And after the work and thinking about project-based learning, she says, I've never been as excited as I am this summer for school next year. And it's reminded me about, and I hear this, why I got into teaching in the first place. So these type of interventions are great for students, and they're great for teachers.
Thank you, Luz. Karen, you got your hand up?
Yes, hello, thank you for the presentations. I guess I wanted to follow up on that last, self-introduction.
Please.
Karen Chow. I'm a parent at SFUSD, and I have a middle schooler, 8th grader at Presidio, and I wanted to follow up on that question about the teacher shortage and staffing, and I liked hearing our presenters talk about potential ideas for recruiting new teachers. And I'm just thinking, we have San Francisco State, right, in our city. And I'm just wondering, I'd love to hear from the district, like what are we doing to partner with, say, SF State's teaching credentialing program to attract teachers from that school, people who want to be teachers into our district. That's my question.
Thanks, Karen. We'll follow up. We'll have district folks follow up on that question. But if it's okay, we'll kind of keep questions tonight for the moment to our two presenters. So any further comments from Bob or Maria on the questions of sort of innovative strategies around partnering with institutes of higher education, or did you feel like you've covered what you wanted to say in that respect? I'll take silence.
Yeah, I don't. There's.
It's good. Thank you.
The one thing I did want to add for Luz's question that I didn't address was parents. In 2019, we commissioned a survey of parents across the country, and actually students as well. And in describing what project-based learning experience was, not looking for them to say PBL, but describing it and saying, is this what you rate that on, is it an experience you'd like to have your son, your student experience? Over 68% of parents and students agreed that those were the type of experiences they want to have. So I think that's also something, is as you're thinking about this as a task force, and I think you have a lot of that data. Like, I know students are asking for these type of experiences. I imagine that parents are looking for that same sense of engagement, empowerment, and agency that strategies that Maria shared and I shared through project-based learning. And so that you get that experience where, like I said earlier, where your student comes home and talks to you about what's happening in school because they're excited about it.
Great. I think a little bit later I'll ask Superintendent Wayne if he wants to comment on the sort of the district's approach to partnerships with institutes of higher education, and also just as a reminder, Karen and others, there is a presentation from several meetings ago from district staff around the district's approach to deeper learning, both design of policy and implementation. So might be some data and information there for you as well. But let's see if there's other questions for the presenters. Leonda, Langston, Juliana, anything you guys want to ask?
I don't think I have any questions at this moment.
Okay, Juliana?
Not really a question, just a comment. I've had a chance to be a part of PBL Works in the summer.
Can you introduce yourself to them?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm Juliana Malulu, science lead at John O'Connell High School, and we are a big project-based learning school. So yeah, quite a few of our teachers have done PBL works, but there's always new teachers coming into the mix, and it'd be nice for them to have the opportunity to do it as well. So I was just wondering if there's possibly any district funding for it, or because I think when I did take it, it was a few years back, maybe I would possibly like reimbursement, but I don't think teachers know that off the bat. And I think there's, correct me if I'm wrong, a two-part PBL 101, maybe PBL 201, yes. And it was, I think it was difficult for me to get the funding for this to participate in the second workshop, and it was completely on Zoom, but it was still very helpful. And so I think it's a valuable thing for teachers to learn. Also, just going back to, and I forget her name, she mentioned about SF State. I often get students that are my student teachers. I currently have one right now from SF State. So they are kind of funneling in candidates that want to be teachers. I just not sure if there's like a formal way they're doing it, but I've had 2 in a row at this point. So.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. We do have thank you for sharing, and we do have partnerships with SF State, and work to bring in their student teachers. And something we did differently this year than in past years is we offered student teachers a contract to be in the district in early spring to try to get them to commit, even if we didn't have a placement yet. Wanted them to know we wanted them in the district. And I think one of the things that will come out of these recommendations is what are some programs or professional learning opportunities we want to commit to district wide. I think the district has had a pretty decentralized approach to many things, that has its benefits, but I think for some things, when we talk about wanting to have a consistent educational experience, something like PBL, we're working with the core rubric right now, which and then we have a deeper learning framework. We do want some more consistent district-wide practices. So this could lead to some more district-sponsored activities rather than school sites always needing to decide and find funding for different professional learning opportunities.
Maria or Bob, any reflections on those last couple of comments?
One thing that we have on the higher education partnership, one of the things that we did a project called Out of the Gate. It's funded by a foundation in Los Angeles, ECMC. And that project was teaming up with schools of education and school districts that we were partnering with, so that student teachers were paired up with a partner teacher who was implementing project-based learning. So they actually in their student teaching, they did a small project, because in that we felt that they would be more likely than to actually start teaching in a project-based way when they came in, as opposed to because that was what the district's focus was. They wanted all their teachers to be doing projects with students at least 2 a year. So it might be another strategy in thinking about working with San Francisco or with San Francisco State to think about how the placement is, like, as you're trying to recruit and build capacity, that it's just not the luck of the draw that they get to be in Juliana's classroom and doing projects, that that they're going to be in classrooms with partner teachers that are doing project-based learning or whatever other deeper learning strategy you're thinking about, because that's where you get grounded in what your real life experience is as a teacher, is in your student teaching.
And to build onto that is, I know that there's a couple residency programs in San Francisco Unified District, and schools of education have had an awakening in terms of how to partner well with districts. So it's a good time now to sit down, and I know some of the work that we do in Ed Prep Lab is about cultivating strong district and preparation program relationships, and really seeing those relationships as reciprocal. So not just schools for warm bodies, but really like what are the district priorities, and then having deep conversations and relationships with preparation programs to work together to prepare the teachers for the types of work that you want to be seeing in your districts. So it's a good time to have those conversations and build those bridges, and share your priorities and your specific contexts in schools with your preparation programs, and then therefore your student teachers.
Vanessa.
Thank you for that. You guys don't have to answer this now, but I think a really important question is going to be around correlation of data, especially in terms of achievement for students of color, students with disabilities, as well as is there any correlation of data versus attendance, right? Because we are faced with a couple of different challenges which become opportunities if we can be data informed. So we could just check back any research that we could float up to the high school task force, then that would be awesome, because then we're also addressing issues related to achievement for those populations that I just mentioned, and also attendance. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. We'll do that after the meeting. We have several resources that both Bob and Maria mentioned, which have kind of the underlying research base and make connections to student outcomes. So we'll just make sure we have the right ones to post to the group. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to the task force discussion part of the conversation? If not, Bob and Maria, you guys are welcome to stay on and listen, but we didn't want to make that an obligation for the last part of the meeting while the task force has some reflections on what they've heard from you and what they still want to learn about this topic. So I want to take a formal chance to say thank you to you both, Maria Hyler and Bob Lenz. Thank you for being here this evening, sharing your wisdom, engaging with the Q&A, and for sharing resources that we'll make available to the task force.
Thank you all for the great work you're doing and the commitment to the children in the schools. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And it's same as Maria. Thank you for engaging in this work. It's so important.
Thanks a lot, Bob. All right, task force members, here's what we're going to do, and members of the public, if you mind listening carefully to this as well. We have about a half an hour left this evening. The last 10 minutes, we'd like to reserve more or less 10 minutes for public comment. If there's less public comment, we'll make it less than that. So for task force members, I'd like you to, let me just share my screen one more time. I'd like you to think about kind of 3 questions. When it comes to deeper learning in particular, what resonates with you from the presentations? So you've been listening and you've been engaging. What's resonating with you? What feels missing? Like what did not get talked about tonight that feels important in relation to the task force's charge, and what questions do you still have? So what resonates, what feels missing, and what questions remain for you? So I'd like to actually just let things go quiet for about 5 minutes to let you write down any reflections you have, think about that, and then we'll have a discussion amongst you, and we'll listen carefully to that as facilitators. And meanwhile, members of the public, so I can gauge what kind of interest there is in giving public comment this evening. Our protocol always includes the opportunity for public comment at the end of meetings. So if you wouldn't mind sending a chat message to me, just indicating that you want to give public comment, either about tonight's topic or anything that's in the task force's remit. So task force members, I'm going to set a quick timer for 5 minutes. We'll go quiet. You can stay on or off camera, your choice, and then we'll begin talking, and I'll look at the chat to see if there are members of the public who want to give public comment. Thanks. All right, that's not a full 5 minutes, but if you're ready to chat, come back on screen. If you're not ready to chat, stay off screen, and that'll signal to me that you need more time. All right, I see folks coming back on. So let's jump into a discussion. Point of tonight, again, this is an opportunity for you all to talk with one another, and we'll listen about what's resonating for you, what feels missing, and what questions do you have. So who wants to jump in? Go ahead, Vanessa.
Okay. I thought that both of the presentations was informative. One of the things that resonates with me as a parent is this notion of shared power, as well as an environment filled with safety and belonging. I think those two have come loud and clear. Our parents have been part of focus groups statewide, and they have consistently spoken about their babies not really feeling like they belong, safety concerns, as well as a real imbalance in power. I think for me, what's missing is a very clear through line about the partnership with parents. What does that actually concisely look like? I think that would be helpful kind of moving forward, because it's hard to make a recommendation without kind of seeing like how that could look. And it's obvious that there's lots of case studies out there. And then the last question for parents of public schools of San Francisco is really going to be about feasibility. I mean, is this feasible, given all the district's priorities and challenges? Really wanting to make recommendations that we're doing really, really super well and we have really tight, right? So how are we gonna kind of consider feasibility? Thanks.
Thanks, Vanessa. Others?
This is Karen. Ciao.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, everyone. So I guess, yeah, thank you, Vanessa. That was very helpful. I think the feasibility thing maybe is also a bit connected with what, I appreciate these frameworks and I appreciate bringing in these, folks who have looked at what is working, I guess, in the schools that they have either worked with or studied. And so I guess it comes back to yeah, like, you know, the parents being in that partnership, also the teachers, like what kind of supports are the teachers getting to do things like project-based learning? Where is that happening in our district? You know, how is that happening? I guess that comes back to the feasibility, and is that scalable, or is that even what teachers are encouraged or interested in doing? I guess I feel right now, I guess I feel like a little bit unclear about how supported the teachers and the staff would be to do, you know, really cool sounding, innovative, you know, cutting edge learning experiences like this. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
I can just say again, I mean, I think staff would be supported, and we want this happening. You know, I think we've talked about in this group, like our graduate profile and wanting kids to be college and career ready, like that's aligned. What I think is the thing to consider, and the challenge, like if this comes out as a recommendation, is again, schools have a lot of autonomy and there's different practices that happen, and we haven't, you know, centrally driven some core practices that consistently. So that would be what the shift would be. But, you know, but I know, I'll say superintendent, if I walk in the class, I mentioned this core rubric that has some ways to look at our students, you know, engaged in the kind of instruction and learning we want them engaged in. Like these types of approaches definitely aligns with that.
Hey, Dr. Wayne, can I put you on the spot then, just to reflect a little bit more? When you go into classrooms, what are you seeing when you're thinking about the core rubric? Are you seeing practices that are aligned with the core rubric in general, or are there patterns that you're observing that you that sort of lead you to think about different things the district needs to do?
I got to get going. Sorry. No. Yeah. No, I mean, I've been visiting classrooms, but I wouldn't say that I yet have a full analysis like that. That's actually one of our jobs this year as part of our guardrails on curriculum. But I would say when I go to schools, it's very clear schools have different focus areas that I think, you know, play out in some of the ways that I've seen the teaching in the you know, in the classroom. And so, you know, so like, you know, you know, as an example, and wait, who was talking where they did PBL? Was that John O'Connell?
Juliana did, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I've been there, and so I see that, you know, I see that there. Whereas I'd say some of our more, when I visited some of our more traditional comprehensive high schools, is more traditional approach that you would see, that I saw. But like with the wall-to-wall pathways at O'Connell, I feel like there's a, you know, an orientation towards the, you know, hands-on, deeper learning, but also like kind of hands-on learning in the couple of visits I made.
Juliana, you came off on camera. Did you want to jump in? Otherwise, see Luz has her hand up too.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, yes, we do have like the wall-to-wall pathways, but because of that, there's also CPT time designed for those pathways. So teachers get that time to plan those long and lengthy PBL projects. So, but not all teachers. For example, myself, I'm not in the pathway. I'm a singleton. I teach AP Bio and Biotech, so it's not universal across the board, but it is nice to have.
Luz and Langston, you both want to jump in? Go ahead, either one of you.
Yeah, I just had, I guess, a comment. So if what I'm hearing tonight is that PBL is just not a way into a way into deeper learning, but it's also can be used as like a powerful recruiting tool. So I want to hear eventually, maybe not tonight, it's not the night, but knowing this, what is this district's commitment to using PBL as not only a teaching tool, but a recruiting tool?
Thanks for flagging that. Langston, you want to jump in?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again. I want to go back to the discussion questions about what resonates with me, and that was definitely the authenticity that project-based learning brings to the table, and how it connects students together in groups of students, which I think is really important to solve challenging questions. And something that I felt was missing was an implementation strategy for a district like SFUSD that is so vast and so diverse, and how we would implement project-based learning in an equitable way to keep equity at the center of the conversation, like it is in SFUSD's dream model. And another question I had is actually about looping, which was previously mentioned in the first presentation, and how that would work in a high school setting. That was something that I had a question about when I first heard it, because I know looping is when teachers are like following students throughout their journey at the school, and I've seen that in elementary school and middle school, but I had a question how that would work in a high school setting with the different types of classes they're taking and how they're switching every year, and how a teacher would be able to follow through a student's academic journey through looping in high school.
Jeanette, would you mind coming off of mute and sharing a little bit about the practice of looping in high schools?
Yes, just a second, let me come off camera. Great, nice to see everyone. Well, I know Maria mentioned this in particular in her presentation, but looping is the practice of following students for more than one academic year as their instructor. And so sometimes you can have one individual teacher, or you might have teams of teachers that follow a cohort of students, so that, as Maria mentioned, they would get to know those students better as both individual people, but also their strengths as learners and their needs as learners, so that over time they're really like supporting a trajectory of increased cognitive demand and increased supports where needed, where the challenge kind of ramps up because the teachers are informed with what the students already know and can do, and they can continue to push them over time. And I think, teachers struggle, as Juliana has mentioned already tonight, with whether there's time to plan and whether there's time to talk with other teachers in order to support the needs of students. But the looping can be done at the high school level if you're assigned a group of students, or for more than 1 year at a time. Did that answer your question, Langston?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add that in some cases you might not have academic looping, where your science teacher, for example, might not follow you multiple years, but you could have an advisory where your advisor is assigned to you as a 9th grader and then continues to follow you throughout your 4 years, as long as they remain there at the school and you do as well.
Other comments, reflections from task force members? I have not had anyone indicate to me through the chat that they wanted to give public comment, so we can continue on. It looks like one person is raising their hand from the public, but let's wait on that. So just want to take one more pass. Any further questions, comments, reflections from task force members based on what you've heard tonight? Go ahead, Vanessa.
Sure. I think some of the common themes that are coming up is around implementation and feasibility. And I think that's going to probably be the case around any program, new juncture, relaunch, whatever it is. So I feel like we should talk about that. Like, what is the threshold, right? Like, how much can we do, or how far can we go? Because I think that's helpful in making decisions. For example, if 9 schools do PBL and some of them it's 30% efficacy and the other is 70, we see a start in something because it's already happening. But if nobody does PEL, then that's like a whole nother conversation. So I think we need to kind of gauge all of these categories and kind of see like, what are we doing and what's that threshold, right, look like? And then we'll be able to provide more realistic recommendations.
You know, one thing, if I could add, Matt, here, that I've been thinking about, having listened to a lot of young people talk about their experiences in the focus groups, and then of course the transcript analysis that we did that shows what courses students have access to over their 4 years in high school. One of the things that came up in multiple conversations with the school teams looking at those data together was that we have a way of basically measuring what students are getting in terms of access to specific courses that are A to G eligible, right? They're reaching college eligibility through completing the A to G requirements. But the thing that people raised up to us a lot was, how do you quantify, or how do you get at Langston's question, which is, which kids are getting access to these more authentic, more deep learning kinds of activities? Because that's not showing up in a transcript. That's not being registered anywhere. It's very hard to sort of capture which students are getting access to those kinds of experiences and which students aren't. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation, that, you know, Bob mentioned this as an important equity lever, that all young people should have access to these kinds of learning opportunities, and Maria did as well. How do we as a school district, since we believe in it, right? It's a priority area that Superintendent Wayne mentioned, but how do we understand where it's happening?
Danny, you came on camera. Do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. I just want to mention that, sorry, my internet timed out there for a few minutes, so I hope no one mentioned this. But I do want to mention that the district is involved in a project to establish instructional coherence from pre-K to 12th grade. And it's not public at this time, but it is the focus of teacher professional development, was the focus of our all administrator professional development days at the beginning of the year here in July. And it's really revolving around deeper learning and what we call the core instructional practices. And those involve inquiry, collaboration, demonstrations of learning. All those elements belong to project-based learning. And so the timeline for the instructional guides that they're developing is that first through 5th grade is done already. This year is middle school, and next year, 24-25, is high school. And so there is a team working on developing instructional guides that implement these strategies identified in deeper learning as well as project-based learning. I just want to share that.
Great, thanks. Very much appreciate that, Tammy. Good to have a deeper understanding of the steps the district is taking. All right, if there's no other comments from task force members, this is one. We're going to pivot to brief public comment, has been our practice, and then I'll review next steps. So, just as a reminder to the public and a reminder to task force members, public comment at our meetings is an opportunity for members of the public to share their perspectives either on what we've been talking about tonight or anything that's within the charge of the high school task force. If I would ask, one member of the public has raised their hand. I would appreciate if anyone else who wants to give public comment could do so I can make sure to call on you. But we will go ahead, given the time we have, we'll do 90 seconds. So Joyce Yuan, you want to come off of mute, and if you prefer to put your camera on, your choice one way or the other, and I'll start a timer and you have 90 seconds.
Hello, my name is Dr. Joyce Yuan. I'm a physician and I'm also an alumnus of the San Francisco Public School System, and I'm a graduate of Lowell High School. So on this excellent topic of providing optimal learning environments, I strongly urge the task force to save merit-based admissions at Lowell High School when the matter comes up on the agenda. What's more important than PBL and fundamentally more important than anything we have talked about is that both the educational content and the style of teaching needs to be appropriate for the level of the learner. Remember that there isn't only one type of student. For example, you would never put someone with a 6th grade math level in a 9th grade math level class. And similarly, some students may be very suited for problem-based learning while others are not. Actually, in my medical school, we used problem-based learning, and most of the medical students, including myself, did not find that to be a helpful portion of the curriculum. And however, I understand that perhaps for some other students, it could be helpful and that there are also benefits to it. But what Lowell High School does in the merit-based format is that it finds academically similar types of students, students who perhaps need certain high-level science or math classes that are not provided anywhere else in the public school system. If SFUSD makes Lowell lottery-based without providing any alternative at any other school, that hurts students who don't have funding for private schools. I know for myself, I would not have succeeded in the way that I have if I had to be in a lottery-based school. My middle school was lottery-based. I was heavily bullied for being a good student, and I did not have the psychological safety and did not have an appropriate environment to learn. In fact, I actually tried to dumb down my presentations.
Ms. Yuan, thank you very much. That's your time.
So I would like to urge you to consider that merit-based education is the way to deep learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see one more, just a reaction. I don't see any other hands up to speak. So we'll close public comment and move on to the very last part of our meeting. So just as a reminder, this is the second, tonight is the second of 4 sessions that we are going to be hosting. The third is next Thursday night, and we're going to be focusing on the system level practices to offer students rigorous learning opportunities in the context of career-focused and interest-focused pathway programs. And then a week from then, we're going to be focused on system-level practices to employ selective criteria in high school admissions, exploring both the purposes and critiques of such criteria. So task force members, those of you who are planning on attending those, we'll see you either next week or the week after. And if none of you are joining either of those two, we'll see you on September 9th. So thank you very much. We very much appreciate you all taking the time and look forward to seeing you in person on the 9th. Good night, everyone.